Every time.
Recording started.
I'm really pleased to have asked Jim Gaston to be here today. We had a few from the East Coast, now we're going to have a few from the West Coast. I heard Jim talk to us at the recent meeting in Los Angeles, or was it San Diego a few months ago. And I really was very impressed by the message that he has to give. And the title of Jim is with the South Orange County Community College District. He's actually with the IT staff, he's Office of Information Technology, he's Associate Director. And he has a lot of good experience also. He's part of our group, and I will not take more time and give him the podium to give you his message.
Thanks, Pierre. Appreciate that. I'm going to drive the cameraman crazy because I wander around when I talk, so hopefully the sound is good. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I've never met a sound system I couldn't outshut. So I really appreciate being here, and what I have to say actually meshes almost perfectly with what Gordon had to say, and that was a terrific presentation. It was really great information. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to step back a little bit from that. We're going to talk about very much some similar things like Gordon was talking about these tremendous changes that are happening in technology. One of the things that I find really fascinating as a technologist is to see that interaction between technology and culture. That the needs of the culture initially drive the technology, the innovation that happens arises as a result of somebody needing something or wanting something. Or in Apple's case, making us find out that we needed something that we never even knew existed before, as tends to happen with them. But then what happens is we see these subtle shifts that culture starts to take as it adapts to technology. And so you have this constant rotation of the culture driving the technology and then the technology driving the culture. Now, this is the point in the presentation where I normally give a disclaimer, because I let people know that I am a geek. I'm very proud of that fact. I would love to tell you that this picture was for Halloween, but this was me dressed up for a night out on the town. But I understand, based on this organization, that I'm among my people now, right? I mean, looking around the room, no offense, I see some other people that are of my kind, so I very much appreciate that. There's no muscles in the room, right? We can talk freely about techie things. So I've really been looking forward to this presentation and really appreciate the invitation to come join you folks, especially in San Francisco. I love San Francisco. It's great to do. So I'll talk a little bit too about the power of technology. The very first job I got right out of college was as a programmer for a mortgage company. And we wrote systems for our company on a PDP-11, another Digital Equipment Corporation, and the big fan of digital equipment. It's a sad day that they didn't work out. I did that on a PDP-11, initially a 44, and then we got a PDP-11 84. 16 megahertz processor, that's right. That baby was screaming. 4 megabytes of memory, and that was huge when we doubled it, because initially when I started we only had 2 megabytes of memory, right? I was programming in the Arista-T operating system. Anybody ever do that? Yeah. Remember when I forget which version number it was now, but it was something about that the program size could go from like 64K to 128K. And I was just like, that's phenomenal. Who's ever going to need more than 128K to write a program? So we were really excited about that. Today, I carry around in my pocket an iPhone 4. I don't even have the iPhone 4S because unfortunately my contract isn't for a million. I'm too cheap to pay the full freight on it. But soon, very soon, or maybe I'll just wait for the 5. It has a 1 gigahertz processor and 32 gigabytes of memory. Look at this processing power increase and memory increase in just the last 25 years. The system that we used to use to run an entire company of about 300 employees that process millions of dollars of loans every single year is now dwarfed by this device that I carry around. And as Gordon said, it's really not accurate to call it a phone, particularly if you have an iPhone. Because let's face it, it's not the greatest phone in the world, right? I mean, I have the iPhone 4, so if I hold it just right, like this, maybe the call won't drop. But I don't care, because let me keep. I don't want to talk to people anyway. So what I want to drop calls are a perfect excuse, right? Sometimes I just hang up and go, oh, that's darn AT&T, not my problem. But look also at the reach of technology. Again, as these devices get easier and easier to use, what happens? They start to spread out from among us, from among the elites, from among the geeks, out into the real world. Take a look at some of these statistics. The original iPod took 2.5 years to reach a sales point of 3 million. The Kindle took 2 years to get to that point. The iPad took 80 days. The iPhone 4 took 3 weeks. The iPhone 4S took 3 days to reach that point. So as these devices become easier and easier to use, it's not just a matter of the priesthood anymore that are using these things, right? These are out there among the masses. They're using them, and they are just, I love that video. I had heard about a video of a baby playing with an iPad and then a magazine. I hadn't actually seen that before. That's phenomenal, right? That's the world they're growing up in. That's the way everything is supposed to be as easy as an iPad, which is a bit of a challenge for those of us that are actually building systems. Take a look at some of these statistics from Facebook. You saw some of these earlier from Gordon. More than 800 million users. If it was a country, it'd be the third largest in the world. The statistic down at the bottom I find pretty amazing. People spend 23 billion minutes every single day in Facebook. 23 billion minutes a day in Facebook. Now, my primary job is, I'm not an instructor like you folks. I have been. I was an adjunct professor at one of the colleges in our district. I taught classes before. I really, really love it. But my primary job is building systems. And we build, our community college district is very unique in that we build a lot of the software. We actually built our own student system. And so that consumes most of my time. So when I see statistics like this, I think, why is that? What is it about Facebook that is so compelling that makes people come back to it time and time again? It's not technology. Probably anybody in this room could write Facebook. The technology underlying Facebook is not all that impressive. So what is it about Facebook that is so compelling? And I think this picture really illustrates it really well. This is not a map of the world. This is an intern actually working at Facebook, mined the database, and created a little dot for every Facebook user if they have the geolocation, and then drew lines between that person and every other person that was friends with. Isn't this fascinating? So this is really what this is. This is a map of connections. And that is what makes Facebook so compelling. It's that connection between people. Now, as geeks, we may think, well, who cares, right? There's more people in my life than I really want to be there. I got a little better taste for this at the beginning of last year. On February 9th, I was hospitalized with double pneumonia. I've always been a relatively healthy person. I'd never once even been to the hospital other than the ER for a few broken bones and things like that. And it was a really fascinating experience because it became a really isolating experience. The double pneumonia wound up becoming the least of my problems. My body had this very severe reaction to the infection, and it kicked my immune system into overdrive, and my immune system actually started attacking my own body, which is not a good thing, by the way. Like my boss introduced me to the presentation that we were doing yesterday at one of our colleges, and the story came up, and I like the way he said it. He said, not only do you guys not like Jim, his own body doesn't like Jim. So I really appreciated that introduction. Well, what happened is my body started killing my red blood cells off faster than I could produce them. My wife got one of those wonderful calls from my doctor saying, your husband has taken a turn for the worse, we're moving him into ICU, and you really need to get in here. So I wanted to spend almost 3 weeks in the hospital. For a period of time, it took them a while to figure out what was going on. Fortunately, they fixed it all, and I'm doing great now. But they didn't know what was going on, so they moved me into an isolation ward, which meant everybody coming into the room had to put on a mask, gloves, and a gown. Not just to protect me, but to protect them from anything in case I had anything communicable, which you don't need to worry, they discovered was not the case. So I noticed a few of you started kind of covering your mouth a little bit, so I really am fun. So It was amazing how isolating that was, because you know, when somebody has to dress like that to into your room, there's not a lot of physical contact, right? My wife, my kids are coming in, there's not a lot of hugging going on when they're not, when they have to dress like that to just to enter your room. And it's amazing how isolating it was. My lungs were in such bad condition, it was really difficult to talk, so I couldn't have visitors, nobody could come. But it was amazing the connection that Facebook gave me. My wife refused to bring me my laptop because she thought I would start working, and she was right. So, but they did bring me my iPad at one point and my iPhone, so I was able to stay connected with people over Facebook. My first day in the hospital, my daughter had actually gone onto my laptop. I was still in Facebook, so she actually posted a message and said, "Hey, my dad's really sick. He's in the hospital. Please pray for him." And the messages that started coming in from people, old high school friends that I hadn't seen for 30 years, close friends, family members, colleagues that lived in Ireland and India, started posting these messages of encouragement. And it was amazing, especially for a geek who thinks I don't really want or need people in my life. It was an amazing experience. And I think that's why Facebook is so important. And that's really important for people like us to remember, because that's what this is all about. What this is about is technology that facilitates those connections, those contacts between you and your students are what's really important. The technology is not an end, it's a means to an end. Sometimes we forget that. Some other statistics. You've seen a lot of these things. YouTube is just exploding like crazy. Exceeds 2 billion views a day. The average person spends 15 minutes a day on YouTube. But the statistic I think is really interesting is that more video is uploaded to YouTube in 60 days than all 3 major U.S. networks created in 60 years. That's phenomenal. Now, obviously, 87% of it is videos of cats. So we have to discount that a little bit. It's not just a matter of volume, it's a matter of quality. But if you've watched any of the 3 major networks recently, the quality there isn't so hot either. So it really is backing decentralization of content. It's not just about anybody can become a producer of content now as well. The recommendation engines, these I find fascinating. Very few sites that you go to anymore just sit there as a static site. You know, Facebook makes recommendations to you based on who your friends are and the types of things you've shown interest in. Amazon, the second time we all logged into Amazon was a little startling, right? It's like, welcome, Jim. We think you might be interested in the following books. Now, none of us were fooled by that, right? We didn't think that Bezos was back in a back room somewhere with his people and he said, well, what do you think Jim would be interested in reading? Because I want to make a recommendation to him. We know it's an algorithm, but it makes the whole experience much more compelling. We see that in Apple's products, in Google's products. They're all doing it, but then when our students come to our websites, what are they greeted with? They're greeted with a generic set of menus. They're greeted with generic information. It's not customized to them. It's not personalized to them. What we expect them to do is to do the hard work of sorting through and filtering out the information that isn't relevant to them and making it relevant to them. In our district, we're working on a project right now called Sherpa that's trying to fix that problem. We're creating a student recommendation engine so that when they log into our portal, they are going to get a customized, personalized experience just for them. They're not going to see announcements that are out there for just everybody. They're going to see announcements that are tailored specifically to them. And then once we're done with that, we're going to mine the data warehouse and look at some predictive analytics. So a student who comes to our institution and says, I want to transfer to UC Berkeley as a biology major, we're going to mine our data warehouse and find every other student that has that exact same goal. Look at the ones that were successful and the ones that weren't successful, and use that information to make recommendations. Wouldn't you want to know that, coming in as a brand new college student? Well, why aren't we doing that kind of stuff? It's what everybody else is doing. It's what these students have grown up with. But yet when they come to our institutions, they kind of just get these static, generic menus. So we're going to see what we can do about that. So this kind of technology has transformed entire industry. So this is where we want to pull back a little bit. We want to take a look at the forest instead of just the trees. And again, I'm not telling you anything that at this point I'm sure you don't already know. How much books, the whole entire book industry has been completely transformed. Amazon now sells more Kindle editions than they do paper editions of books. Now, personally, I love books. You know, it's actually a fantastic technology. Right, the batteries never die. You can read it outside. You can read it inside. It doesn't matter. There's some things I really love about that, but there's also some things I really love about my iPad and my Kindle, to be able to read those kinds of books. So the entire industry has been transformed. Every newspaper and magazine in the world is struggling right now because of this very issue. Why would I pay for a newspaper or magazine when I can go out to websites that are absolutely free and get the exact same content? It just doesn't make any sense. And what's sad about these is a lot of these sites they're going to are just aggregators. They're not actually producing this content. They're just linking to other sites. Sites like the Huffington Post and the Drudge Report. Notice I have Huffington Post on the left and the Drudge Report on the right. Now, Huffington Post has actually started producing some content as well, but it started off simply as an aggregator, just like the Drudge Report is. The travel industry. Anybody use a travel agent recently? Right? I've known some people in that industry. The entire industry has just been decimated. Why go to somebody to do that? Well, I can go onto a Travelocity or Expedia, and it's just incredibly easy to use, self-service. Reference books. How many people have used an encyclopedia recently, right? Hardcover, spend hundreds, maybe in some cases thousands of dollars for a set of books that become obsolete as soon as the ink is dry. When I go to Wikipedia, and the accuracy of that information is actually pretty startling. And I've heard some mixed results. I know some people have done some different studies. If I were teaching, I certainly wouldn't take it as a single source for anything, but as a source to go to, particularly since they started forcing the articles to have citations down at the bottom, so you can go back and get the original content. Fantastic resource. Movies, right? We've just seen what's been going on with Netflix and that huge fiasco they went through where they were going to separate the streaming versus the discs. The era of sending around bits embedded onto plastic devices is over. Everything is moving towards streaming. And with the type of sound systems and video screens and everything, if you've been to a movie recently, you may have seen one of the little preview commercials that comes up at the beginning that really kind of mocks watching a movie on a big screen. Why? Because they feel completely threatened. The home experience now is getting to the point where it's almost as good as what you're going to experience in a movie theater, and the floor hopefully isn't sticky too. So that's a big advantage we have. Television, between Hulu and YouTube, I can watch just about any show that I want to. And again, even the advent of the DVR, I don't know of any time now, aside from live sports shows, that I ever watched a show at the time that the producers of that show want to get aired. And I'm sure that's probably the case with most of you. Again, it's empowering the end user, the consumer, rather than the producer. The whole software industry has changed with Apple's App Store, right? Before, I had no choice. I had to use Microsoft Word. No offense. I need to be careful. I forgot where I am. A very large software company in Redmond, Washington, software. Microsoft Word, even the best power user of Microsoft Word is using what? Maybe 5-10% of the features of that. And it costs an enormous amount of money. When I can download an app that does the simple functions that I want for 99 cents, and if I don't like it, I just blew 99 cents, right? The whole software industry is moving toward that and making it much easier for a couple kids in a garage to create a really fantastic app and have that take off. They don't need all the infrastructure of a company that's going to produce volumes of documentation, distribute DVDs, and so on. Communication, we've already talked about Facebook, and Gordon did a fantastic job talking about what's going on in texting. And look what's happened with music. Between Napster and what Apple has done, it's really pretty phenomenal. And I want to do a little, in just a second, we're going to do a little deep dive into the whole what's happened with the music industry. So here are some common threads that I see. As I mentioned before, a real change in the producer and the consumer model. It's no longer just a matter of I just sit there passively and just accept whatever's coming my way. I can actually very easily become a producer, whether that's blogging, writing an app, producing a music video, posting that on YouTube, any number of those things now that has completely reversed. It's not just a matter of the powerful elite being in charge of those communication channels. Decentralized control, a greatly reduced cost to the end users, which makes me far more willing to take risks in my purchases. A very participatory process. Again, it's not just this passive user community. And what that winds up creating is a very motivated and engaged user community. So we're going to dive a little deeper into the music industry and take a look and see what happened with that. This all started in 1877 with Thomas Edison. I read a biography of him. Fascinating guy. He had this great idea of a way to capture sound. Now, most of you probably know that the sound waves are created when air from my lungs pushes up through my diaphragm and my vocal cords vibrate, and it creates these sound waves. So these sound waves are coming out from me, they're moving throughout the room. Inside you, in your ear, is a little drum that is vibrating based on those sound waves, and then there's this cool little mechanism that actually translates those into electrical signals that your brain picks up and interprets, and that's how this whole thing happens. That's how sound is projected and received. So he had this idea, what if I could create the same kind of diaphragm like an eardrum, pick up those vibrations, record those vibrations, and then play them back and basically reverse the process and record sound for the very first time. The very first time he tried it, it worked. Would you love that? I would love. So the very first time I wrote a software program for it to be 100% bug-free, right? And this wasn't 100% bug-free, but it actually worked amazingly well. He recorded the poem, Mary Had a Little Lamb, on this tube that had wax in it. And this little stylus was moving the vibrations, and when he played it back, the sound came out. His vision for this, however, was simply for a dictaphone. He saw this as a way, because back in those days, businesses had these massive rooms filled with stenographers who would just be typing all these memos and things. And so he wanted to replace all that and automate that with recorded speech. He never saw the entertainment value of music or for recorded speech, and he barely made a cent off of his invention. Somebody else came along and created the Victrola that had a very similar type of approach, and they did do really well in the early 1900s. Well, then in the 1920s, we had these vinyl discs that came out. And this was a huge improvement, because what it did, Thomas Edison's and the Victrola actually recorded the sound waves themselves. Now, this was recorded electrically and embedded into the vinyl in these grooves, right? Now, I'm looking around the room, I see an awful lot of people whose hair is pretty much the same shade as mine, so I don't think I'm the only one that used these when you were a kid. And remember invariably what happens is you get this thing going, and then you have to get the needle and get it right. And then, I always missed, and I'd go off the edge, or I'd go off this way. But then over time, what would happen is we get all scratched up, right? So it's not really durable. And I remember one of my brothers got this one that was amazing, because you could put multiple albums on top of each other. Remember that? And then the arm was automated. And so with automatic, you had this little physical arm that came and lifted up the needle, right? And then moved it over to drop it. That was amazing. I mean, it was just like, it was like worshiping the gods to drop down this automation. I could listen to multiple albums at the same time. And the record producers loved it, because what would happen is the needle would go around, the vinyl would heat up. So when the next record would drop down, it would actually squash the little groove. So you did that 5 or 6 times, and the album was pretty much worthless. So they loved that technology, right? Because now I have to go buy a new one. So that was around for quite some time. Then what happened in the 1940s? Reel-to-reel tape machines, right? Because the problem with vinyl is it's really fixed. I can get maybe 10, 12 songs on an album somewhere around there. So this gave me much more flexibility, because the size of the reel would determine it. The problem with this is over time the tape would stretch, and the quality of the sound would really degrade. So this didn't really take off too much as a consumer. But then, oh yeah, I can remember driving my mom's 64 Ford station wagon in high school. And I thought I was so cool. And let me tell you, nothing makes you a chick magnet like driving your mom's station wagon in high school. Like I needed anything else to keep girls from talking to me. But back in my day, that was awesome, because I had 3 older brothers. They don't have to ride their bikes to school, so they were really jealous of me. But I remember putting an 8-track tape player in my mom's 64 Ford station wagon, so my buddies and I could listen to Bachman Turner Overdrive on our 8-track tape player. And so a lot of you, I see the nodding heads, right? So you all remember this. And invariably, your favorite song on the album would be the one where the track had to change. So the song would be going along, right? And then it would fade down, you hear this big chunk as the head moved, and then the music would fade back up. But it was a continuous loop. We didn't have to change it back or rewind it. And so the 8-tracks and the cassettes kind of came out right at the same time. There are advantages and disadvantages to both of those. Same basic technology, just the mechanism itself, actually, and the cassettes kind of wound up winning out because of that. And then, particularly, right, when the Walkman came out. when you could actually, and nothing, let's face it, nothing was cooler, right, than having one of these bad boys attached to your belt when you were out there working out with the big fluffy headphones and everything. Remember those? But man, we could take our music with us. That was revolutionary at the time. It was amazing. That's why it was such a huge success. So then in the 80s, they came around and we had these CDs for the first time. Now what's great about this is it's really durable, right? We didn't have to worry about scratching it quite as much. If you scratch it, it will cause a problem, but not like the record albums. It didn't stretch like the tape did. So this was remarkable. Now every step along the way, the music industry embraced innovation. They loved all this new technology, and why is that, right? Because every time a new medium would come out, what would we do? Well, we go buy all our new albums again, right? We tried. You know, I remember my brother's fancy phonograph also had a tape deck built into it, so you could actually record directly off the vinyl disc onto the cassette, and it just sounded absolutely awful, but we thought it was amazing technology. And invariably, the album wouldn't fit just right in the cassette, so it either cut off, and you'd have this big blank empty space. It didn't work very well. So every time a new medium came out, we'd rush out and buy it. So the music industry thought, awesome. We've got a brand new thing, a bunch of people are going to go out. They made one rather significant mistake though, right? You all know what that is. What was encoded on here was digital for the very first time. It wasn't analog. So what would that mean when I put this into a computer? It would treat it just like any other digital file. Oops. Music industry made a little bit of a mistake there, because then what happened? People started swapping these things around. Now, initially, they weren't all that worried about it, right? Because how much is that really going to take place? Maybe a little bit. They weren't worried about it too much. But when the guys came out with Napster, and now I can install this free piece of software on a computer that automatically indexes all of the music on my computer, puts that out into a central index, and then anybody else who wants that music can automatically reach out through the internet, grab that song and put it on their computer, and then they convert it onto CDs and listen to it. And what happened to sales of CDs? It goes way, way down. How did the music industry react? They started suing all their customers. If you want to endear yourself with your user community, that's the way to do it, right? File multi-million-dollar lawsuits against 17-year-olds. That's the way to react to this kind of a thing. So who came along? Steve Jobs came along and came up with something that was just about as easy as Napster to use, but you could do the right thing, right? Most people don't want to steal. I mean, the kids didn't even see it as steal. I've had these long arguments with my kids about copyright law. You know, as a programmer, of course, I'm a big believer in copyright law. I kept telling them, what you're doing is stealing. In fact, I remember early on, one of my brothers had asked me, I had a software program. He said, well, could I just have the disk so I can install that on my computer? And I said, sure, I can give that to you, but wouldn't it be faster if you just found out the address, the home address of the programmer who wrote that, drive over to their house and just steal the food right out of their baby's mouth rather than doing it indirectly by stealing the work that they did? So I kind of some strong feelings about copyright. So what Steve Jobs did is he came along, came up with a mechanism just as easy to use as Napster, but he went to the music industry and said, your industry is done. It is over. So you want to survive, go ahead and work with me. And they didn't want to, but they went ahead and did it. And what's happening at the Grammy Awards this year, Steve Jobs is actually receiving a posthumous Grammy for the work that he did in basically saving the music industry. You see, 99 cents is no problem, right? I can burn it on multiple devices, I can burn it onto multiple CDs. It just worked. And so now what has happened? The iPod absolutely took off. This is the iPod Nano. This one's actually a couple of years old now, so it's probably not the latest generation. So this little tiny device, right, this big, has a touchscreen interface. Can hold up to 1,000 songs. 1,000 songs on this little tiny thing. It can also pick up streaming FM radio as well, that I can actually pause in midpoint and come back to at a later time. Absolutely amazing when you think about the delta between this technology and this technology. It's occurred in all of our lifetimes. It's just really, really pretty phenomenal what has happened with that. Look, and the people react. Look what happens with the iTunes Store. Opened in 2003. just toward the end of last year, they served up their 16 billion songs. 16 billion songs. Apple took a 30% cut of every one of those songs. You come up with a really, really good idea and implement it well, it's a pretty amazing thing. So change happens. The music industry didn't do such a great job in adapting to the kind of change that is taking place in virtually all these industries. I had the opportunity to listen to this guy speak. His name's Gary Campbell. He's written a number of books. He's one of these management consultants that goes around to a lot of the Fortune 500, even Fortune 100 companies. This is something he said that I really like. Organizations don't miss the future because it's unpredictable, but because it's unpalatable. Any number of people could have told the music industry, look what is coming. There's this tsunami coming to you, and you need to make some changes. They weren't willing to do that because for a whole generation, since the 1920s, this is the way it worked. So why wouldn't that always work that way? Another great quote, every business is successful until it isn't, right? So they don't see any reason to change because they've always been incredibly successful. This is another great quote from his book, The Future of Management. Denial follows a familiar pattern. Disquieting developments are first dismissed as implausible or inconsequential, then rationalized away as aberrant or irremediable, then grudgingly mitigated through defensive action, and then finally, though not always, honestly confronted. So according to him, he studied hundreds of companies. These are the four phases: dismiss, rationalize, mitigate, and self-confront, hopefully at the end. And we see this with the music industry. What do they do initially? Who's going to listen to music on their computer? Right? Those teeny little speakers? That's not going to compete with these high-end stereos. No, this isn't important. And then rationalize. Well, of course we're losing. How can we compete with free? Right? And they're thieves. They're stealing this. So we're going to mitigate it, but we're just going to start filing lawsuits against our customers, right? That's a great idea, right? That'll really get everybody on our side. And then finally, they didn't self-confront. It took a Steve Jobs to come along and confront them with the reality of what was going on. So those are the four phases of change reaction that we've seen. So why is this important? Why are we talking about this? I don't think there's any record executives in the audience. So is this a music industry characteristic or higher education? Centralized control, lack of individualized consumption, inflexible, rising costs, and an increased perception of a low return on investment. Is that us right now? I think it might be. Here's the growth chart of the cost of higher education compared to the cost of living increase recently. How are we going to sustain this? Now, those of us that work in community colleges, we're still this is overall higher education, not us. A lot of friends of mine, their kids are going to private universities. It's ridiculous what they're paying to get the exact same thing that people were getting just 20 years ago. The for-profit challenge, right? Now, we can rationalize this away. We can say, oh, well, the Phoenixes and the Nationals and all that, the quality of what they're doing isn't as high. Really, why are they growing at an exponential rate of growth compared to what we're doing? You know, are we in that same place as the record industry? Looking at this stuff saying, well, that's not going to take off. Nobody's going to want to listen to music on their computers. I mean, come on. It just doesn't even make any sense. So where are we? Are we at the dismissal stage? Are we at the rationalization stage? Are we at the mitigation stage? Recently, the heads of those private universities were hauled before Congress and grilled about some of their activities. Now, I don't know the details of that. It sounded to me like there were some reasons they should be grilled. It sounds like there were some financial aid shenanigans going on. But how much of that is the entrenched bureaucracy reacting to that and trying to suppress the innovation that's coming from those places? So is it time maybe for us in higher education to do some self-confrontation? So why is this important? Well, this is why it's important to me. These are my kids. Kevin on the left, he is a freshman this year. And my daughter on the right, Kayla. She has a more interesting story. She went up to San Francisco State, right up here. I visited her several times while she was going here. Didn't really find a major that she was interested in, so she moved back home, which we were very excited about. And then she announced to me one time, I'm not going to go to college. I'm done. Now you can imagine as somebody working in higher education how I felt about that particular statement. So we started having this conversation. It turned out to be a sort of painful conversation for me anyway. And so I started digging it. I started coming up with all my arguments, right? Well, you need to do this to get a job. You need to, it's important. And she just kept shooting down. She really should be a lawyer. She's a fantastic arguer. So she kept shooting down my arguments one by one. So finally I brought out the granddaddy one, right? This is the one that I knew was going to work. It's not just a matter of getting the degree, because what this does is the acquisition of knowledge in and of itself is such a worthy pursuit. And I want you to have an incredibly rich life, and that's why you need to go to college. She said, Dad, I agree with you 100%, but you know what? I don't need college. You know what? She's right. With the kinds of things that Gordon was talking about earlier, the Khan Academy, the kinds of things that are going on in the open courseware movement, Wikipedia, all these kinds of things out there, she can get all of the same kind of knowledge we're giving her, and she doesn't have to go through all the rigmarole that we make our students jump through. So why? Why is she doing that? Is this what we aspire to be? Just a checkbox? Because that's what it's coming down to. It's going, well, to get a job, you got to have that bachelor's degree on your resume. Is this what we aspire to be? And especially, and I hope this isn't happening in your classrooms, but especially if this is what we're offering our students.
In 1930, the Republican controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression. Anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
So sitting names on the Great Depression. We've all been there, right? We've either been the one talking, and we look at it and we see his glazed eyes, or we've been the one in the audience going, does this person have any idea that nothing they're saying is connecting, right? So if this is what we're offering our students in our classroom, and they can go out there and find any range of options, right? The open courseware movement is amazing. So MIT puts all of their courses online for free. Stanford, I was having some of my developers start to work on an iPhone application. So we use Blackboard Mobile. I asked the Blackboard Mobile people, where can I send them for some training? Oh, just go out to Stanford. They put their entire iPhone development course online for free. It's taught by two Stanford professors and some engineers from Apple who worked on the iPhone original. Okay? Are we going to be able to compete with that kind of quality? If all we're offering in our classrooms is just canned lectures, then we're not going to be able to compete with that, right? So what is it going to take? I think somebody's going to come along and really just rethink the whole way higher education works, leveraging all of these resources that are out there. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it might wind up looking something like this, which is the next video clip. Oh, that would have been such a great introduction. The video clip's coming up next. Future of higher education, what do I think? And again, I'm just a practitioner, I'm just a geek. I think it's going to be personalized, I think it's going to be interactive, I think it's going to be participatory, it's going to be far more student-centered, and as Gordon said earlier, it's going to be mobile. Maybe, just maybe, it's going to look something like this.
I find that education, I think it don't matter where you go to school. Italy, America, Brazil, it's all the same. It's all just memorization. And it don't matter how long you can remember a day, just so you can parrot it back for the test. And I got this idea for a school I would like to start. Something called the 5-minute university. And the idea is that in 5 minutes, you learn what the average college graduate remembers 5 years after 3 or 2 out of school. Would it cost like $20? That might seem like a lot of money, $20 just for 5 minutes. But that's for like a tuition, cafe and gown rental, graduation picture, math, everything included. You know, like in college, you have to take foreign language. Well, at the 5-minute university, you can have your choice. Any language you want, you can take it. Say if you want to take Spanish, what I teach you is ¿Cómo está usted? That means how are you? And the answer is muy bien, means very well. And believe me, if you took 2 years of college Spanish, 5 years after out of school, ¿Cómo está usted? Muy bien. Not always going to remember. So in my school, that's all they learn. You don't have to waste your time with the conjugation, vocabulary, all that junk. You have to look at it anyway. What's the difference? Economics, supply and demand. That's it. Business is you buy something and you sell it for more. Well, after the courses are all over, then it's time for a little Easter vacation. No time to go to Fort Lauderdale, only lasts 20 seconds. But what I do for you, I like to turn on a sunwire, and I'll give you a little glass of orange juice. That's for the snack part, orange juice. And then after vacation, after swallow real quick, then it's the time for the final exams. I say to you, ¿Cómo está usted? You say, muy bien. Where is God? We got it everywhere. Economics, supply and demand. Then I put on your cap and gown. I get out to my Polaroid camera. Make a little snap a flashy picture for you. I give you the picture. You give me $20. I give you the diploma. And you're a college graduate. Ready to go. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, right next door to the Simon University, I'm going to open up a little law school. You got another minute?
I don't know about you, I hope that's not what it looks like, right? But is it going to take someone to come along and really rethink it? Is the Steve Jobs of higher education going to come along and completely transform the way you and I do business? And is that already happening with the Open Courseware Initiative? Just this week, MIT announced the MIT-X initiative. I don't know how many of you saw this. Essentially, what they're doing now is they're building on the Open Courseware Initiative that they essentially launched once they put all that out there. And now they're actually starting to package that up, and they will issue a certificate of completion for people to go through and take a set of courses absolutely free, taught by MIT professors. And at the end of that, they're going to have something to prove that they completed that successfully. They'll be taking exams, they'll be doing all of this stuff. Stanford's doing the same thing. Stanford is giving away classes for free. A whole group of us in my department are going to be taking a Stanford class, taking the exact same exam. The only difference is we don't get Stanford units, but we're also not paying Stanford tuition. It's absolutely free. I don't know how many of you heard about these digital badges. Have you heard about these? These are a way, it's almost like it's similar to a degree or a certificate, but it's much down at a lower level. So for instance, I hire people to come into our staff. We require a bachelor's degree. Why do we require a bachelor's degree? I don't really know, to be honest. Because there's nothing about having a bachelor's degree, in my experience, that's going to tell me whether they know how to program or not. Because I've got some people on my staff that have master's degrees from USC, and I've got people who only graduated from high school, and I see absolutely no difference in their programming capabilities. But if I could have something very specific that tells me, have they really mastered the skill set necessary? And I'm not just talking about cranking out the code. I'm talking about, have they worked in an agile team? Are they familiar with the Scrum methodology? Do they know how to interact with the end users? That kind of specificity, that's going to mean more to me as an employer than just a generic degree. Now, there's still some fantastic things about the liberal arts education, don't get me wrong. And that's why we require it. At least it tells us they know how to set a goal and complete that goal. And they've been exposed to some things that perhaps turn them into a more well-rounded person, which is a fantastic thing. I'm not discrediting that in the slightest. But as an employer, what I'm mostly concerned about is the kind of thing that a digital badge. So is it going to take somebody to come along, Take the Khan Academy, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, all of this free courseware, package it up into something, and then come up with a great deal for both the student and the employer. What if I guarantee the employer, if you hire one of my graduates, I will pay you their first 6 months' salary if they don't turn out? What if I guarantee the student, you'll get a job or I'll give you your money back? What if I start to develop a completely different way of thinking about communicating this information, leveraging this kind of decentralized technology? Is higher education going to be really different in the near future than it's been for you and me? I think there's a lot of potential here. Marty O'Connell is the Executive Director of Colleges That Change Lives. I really like what he said here in the middle. Noted that the greater the opportunity for engagement and critical, creative, and collaborative learning with faculty, peers, and community, the more likely the chance for future success. I love Gordon's clip of flipping the classroom, right? That's a great example. Leverage that existing content out there and use the classroom for something that they can't get anywhere else. If you're just going to stand up there and lecture for an hour, I can get that somewhere else. But to have the opportunity for one-on-one interaction with an expert in the field or a small group or something like that, that's gold. I can't get that online the way I can in face-to-face. So let's think about what's going on in the classroom. And I'm going to close with this. This is the self-confrontation. Here's some questions I came up with. I'm sure you're already thinking of your own. In the classroom, like I said, what can we offer them that they can't get anywhere else? Are we truly helping them to learn? How can we personalize their experience but still maintain the quality and standards? How is the classroom different today than it was 25 years ago? How is the classroom different that you're teaching in than the one you sat in as a student? Maybe we have whiteboards now instead of chalkboards, and we have PowerPoint instead of the overhead. But is the actual interaction any different? Is it any improved? I'm not saying we throw everything away. There's been some fantastic things about our education. But has it improved at all since we were in college? And is the content relevant to their lives? I have some questions up here for student services, so I'm going to skip through those because I think it's mostly instructors. In general, are we listening to our students? Are we building our class schedule to benefit them or to benefit the faculty's convenience? How are we leveraging technology to meet higher demand in a time of fewer resources? And are we making a difference? And ultimately, for all of us, have you lost your passion, right? It's tough being a teacher, you know? A lot of students are coming in with this entitlement mentality that's really irritating. And because they've grown up with this technology that is so personalized and so customized, they don't handle bureaucracy all that well, right? And sometimes they can be downright rude about it. And time after time, but if you've forgotten what it is that made you want to be a teacher in the first place, if you've forgotten that professor who ignited in you the love for learning, I still remember mine. I still remember the ones that had absolutely nothing to do with computer science where I wound up. And they were phenomenal. So why is this important? I'll tell you why. Because we are in an industry that changes lives, right? We're not selling widgets. We're not selling deodorant. We're not selling some things that are maybe necessary out there, but don't really make a substantive change. This isn't just an academic thing for me, because I don't just work in the community college system. I'm a product of the community college system. When I was a senior in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but the one thing I absolutely knew beyond anything else was there's no way I was going to college. I was sick of it. I was bored in high school. I saw no reason to go to college. My older brothers were brilliant, so they were straight-A students. I could never compete on an academic level with them, not with 4 boys in the family. There's any sibling rivalry, of course. But they just wasn't, I had absolutely no interest in doing that. What it took was my high school Sunday school teacher came and picked me up in his VW bus, drove me to LA Pierce College, and said, you know what you're going to do in life? Are you from Pierce? Yes. Fantastic. Changed my life. That institution absolutely changed my life. He drove me over there. I enrolled in 7 units my first class, my first semester, because I knew this wasn't going to work out. One of the classes was welding, because I wanted to learn to weld. So, hey, I got to go here. Another one was PE, right? But then the next semester I took a few more units. And I wound up in some classes with some instructors who ignited in me a love of learning that has not extinguished 30 years later. That's what we do. And because of that, my life has changed. That's what you guys do for people. And that's phenomenal. How many people at the end of their careers get to look back and say, you know what? I changed lives. Not just a few, not just 10 or 20. I changed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's lives. That is too important to let somebody else come along and change the system that we're in. That's why we need to take control of this. We need to stay relevant. We need to leverage these kinds of technologies in a way that allows us to change lives even more. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.